Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations looking for those 1,000 best practices. The technologies, the services, and the products are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we go to a planet that has 9 billion souls from the 7+ billion right now, how are we going to be able to provide the food, the fuel, the fiber, all the basic infrastructure that is needed? One of the things that we really need to be very concerned about is how we're going to feed 2 billion new people on the planet, and to not only just to take care of them, but actually increase the quality of life. And we're going to have a gentleman who is actually very diligently working on this. This is Jarrod Goldin. He is the founder of Millennium Farms up in Ontario, Canada. He's coming in by Skype. And sitting right beside me is Bill Busker, William S. Busker, who is the Executive VP for Emerald Planet. And Bill, thank you for being here as our special guest. And Jarrod, welcome to the Emerald Planet all the way from Ontario, Canada.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
I'm glad to have you here. And we see, I think, some of the insects that we're going to be talking about. And I understand that insects are sexy. And so tell us about the purpose of the Millennium Farms as it relates to producing really the next generation of food for ever-expanding world population.
Sure, great. I guess we see Millennium Farms as a primary producer of insects and insect protein. We hope to set and raise the standards along the way for that food production source. And we're working hard at doing that.
Well, looking at the how and the why of producing insects and really moving into what at one time was probably a very narrow niche market, which is actually now a very expanding market all around the globe. So how did you get started with insects for human consumption?
Well, I was fortunate enough to join my brothers who have been farming insects for the reptile trade for about 7 or 8 years, and they've done that quite successfully. And over the past year, we saw the increasing interest in entomophagy and insect eating as it relates to a solution to feed, not only the coming 2 billion people that we're adding to the planet, but those of us that are already here, as well as our pets and our livestock eventually. And it was a natural transition for us from that type of farming for reptiles and now into humans. There is a distinction between our farms, and that need is essentially what drove us to do something, great for the world and maybe something that we can leave to our children as a legacy.
Well, looking at the creation of new green jobs, I tell you, this is something that can be done because the entry, if you're in various developing countries, may be much lower cost than if you're trying to do something with large animal proteins. So why should citizens around the world, if we can bring back this image, I want to put a couple of images up here because this looks like a fantastic bowl of soup. So why should they consider insects versus, cattle, pork, chicken, sheep, goats, camels, all the large animals, and even rabbits and poultry that it's out there?
Well, essentially there are 2 reasons. One is because it is likely the most healthy source of protein that's available to us. It's not only just a tremendous source of protein, but it's packed full of iron, calcium. It contains all 9 essential amino acids and a fantastic ratio of omega-3 to omega-6. The second reason is because of its tremendous environmental benefits. It's many, many, many times more efficient than traditional protein farming. So for example, about 10 grams of meat to produce takes about 100 gallons of water. And for about 12 grams of insect protein, we only need about 10 gallons of water. So if a family of 4 ate insect protein once a week, about 50 grams, let's say per person, they could save the planet about 650,000 liters of water, or over 200,000 gallons.
If you look at this image here, this is some of the comparison. Jarrod, if you want to trigger off this, we're showing the 10 kilograms of food here and the insect versus the cow. Talk about the amount of protein that's being produced, you know, vis-a-vis the insects versus the cattle. And then I want to go back to this image just in a minute about the greenhouse gas emissions. But let's take the protein content first.
So yes, as I was mentioning, this slide, we can see two things out of it. One is that the same amount of feed input produces 9 kilograms or 22 pounds of insect protein and 1 kilogram or 2.2 pounds of beef protein. So we would need to destroy far less forest and land to grow the food, which would be the feed input for this protein source. And that's one of the large issues with the traditional protein farming like cows and other things, is the food that it takes to feed them. The second part is the protein that's produced. It's not just food, but it's water. So you have a far more efficient process. It's about the same conversion ratios with water as it is for feed input.
Yeah, well, I think this is something important as the world is becoming drier all around the planet, and this is something we have to be conscious of. But also, this is something that we hear about. If we can go back to this slide, as far as the greenhouse gas emissions, it's just amazing the greenhouse gas emissions just from large-scale animals.
Yeah, and you know, the other interesting thing as well for us is that we don't have to use any pesticides, any antibiotics, any hormones, and the output as well, once again, is far more environmentally friendly with respect to methane.
I'm going to jump on over here to this. Looking at the grasshopper, what are the different types of edible insects that are out there, and then is there any difference of the protein, fat, carbohydrate output of these various edible insects?
Yeah, so there are thousands of kinds of different insects out there, and for people that are into, you know, food and eating, people who are foodies, this should be interesting to them, because if you're going to prepare meat or chicken, although our chefs have done that very creatively and I enjoy those foods myself, the opportunities in insect and the art of insect food is far, far, far greater given the tremendous amount of species. We specialize in crickets and 3 kinds of worms, mealworms, superworms, and waxworms. But there are far, far more species than that.
Now, looking at this conversion, I'm just going to let you kind of, let's just walk through these slides, Jarrod, because this is the first time that we've had this topic on the Emerald Planet TV. And I really want to set the stage because we're going to revisit this in the future. So I'm just going to turn you loose on these slides. We'll kind of walk through these. Just take your time and explain to both our domestic and international audiences what they are learning and the importance of really looking at insects versus the traditional way of preparing and having meals.
Okay, so basically, the insects that we farm and the worms, they're similar in that they contain about 65% protein. So it's a very, very, very high source of protein. And then they have, like I said before, omega-6s, omega-3 amino acids. So they are absolutely chock full of protein. And when you compare, you know, the protein in other forms of meat like chicken and fish and beef, for example, it is not as efficient a source of protein. And then as well, with our feed inputs, we're able to produce, you know, essentially, let's say a regular line, an organic line, a paleo line, and we now are soon going to have a gluten-free line, where the inputs that we're feeding the insects are gluten-free. Therefore, when we convert that insect into a flower, for example, you'd have a gluten-free protein input. And we could do that for the people that like the paleo diet as well, where there would be no grain-fed input to the protein source. We would use other feed inputs, and then you would have a non-grain-fed protein. Again, without the antibiotics and pesticides and everything else. Okay,
go on to the slide we have here, total footprint. Can you see that?
Yes. So with respect to this slide, our facility is approximately 9,000 square feet, the one that we're using for human farming now, and we're in the process of developing a second and a third facility. In the 9,000 square foot facility, we can grow approximately 2,500 to 3,000 pounds of insect flour, which is about 12 to 15,000 pounds of insects. So we can also go vertical, which is up, and that also creates much more scale of efficiency with respect to the amount of land that we need to use to grow the same amount of protein.
So what we can say, Jarrod, then the output is much greater and much more intense use of a much smaller footprint as far as CO2 emissions, the feedstock inputs, and particularly water, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and then we have this one, I think you started on this particular topic a little earlier on, and what I really want you to emphasize here is the emphasis on proteins versus the fat and the carbohydrates over conventional farming.
Well, I think in this case, Sam, the slide speaks for itself. Obviously, there's far more protein in the cricket than the cow. The fat is better and healthier, and there's not as much. And there's very healthy carbohydrates. I said to someone the other day, insects are to protein what water is to liquid. There's very little you can say that is wrong about it, or that we would have an issue with respect to this as a protein source. It's very, very healthy protein. And it's not just, and that health is a circle, because our health is intimately related to the environment as well. And our food choices, as they pertain to impacting the environment, I think is a new social consciousness that we're all becoming aware of.
And also, I think this becomes a social justice issue as well, where you can have people, literally citizens all over the planet, increasing the production as far as proteins and carbohydrates are concerned in a much more concentrated area, and even using traditional or native species from within their own communities. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in our own countries, if our governments give us tax subsidies to change our windows to make our homes more energy efficient, they should give us tax subsidies when we buy insect protein from the grocery store, because we're also saving tremendous kilojoules of energy.
Yeah, if we can go out with this image here, this is the insects. Countries are using it around the globe, if we can put that up. Anyway, Jarrod, we're going to be losing you in about 2 or 3 seconds, so thank you for being with us. As you know, you will be back with us. This is Jarrod Goldin, who is the founder of Next Millennium Farms in Ontario, Canada. Came in to us by Skype, and we're talking about the impact as far as insects are concerned. And really, it's beyond the horizon in a sense as far as adding to the food sources as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's some matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about ring-top, nothing very nice. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches, don't play with fire. Yeah.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire!
Why don't you just wash your car at home?
When I wash my car, everything runs down the street and down into the storm drains. With all the chemicals in the soaps and waxes, the last thing I want to do is poison my own drinking water.
At least here, it's all contained and recycled on site.
That's why I also take my car in for oil changes instead of doing it myself. I might take a chance on spilling stuff.
You know what the best part is?
What?
More time to kick back and watch the game.
How far would you go to protect the planet?
I want you to build an ark.
Here we go. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Ow!
Maybe there's another way.
People, the flood is imminent!
Is it too much to ask for a little precipitation?
Go to fightglobalwarming.com to find out what you and your community can do to reduce global warming pollution.
Somewhere around the world, there are men and women of the armed forces risking their lives, helping rebuild communities after natural disasters, collecting toys for needy children, tutoring kids in school. These are your sons and daughters who work to keep us safe, secure, and free. Dedicated men and women who put their country first.
to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
To the Emerald Planet, as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States, as we look for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move towards 2050, and we're adding 2 billion new people to the planet. And so we're looking at how we're going to provide the basic infrastructure, but at the same time, how we're going to be able to provide the food and also protect the water resources in doing this. We have a gentleman coming from Ontario, Canada. His name is Jarrod Goldin. He's the founder of Millennium Farms. And then following him within the same segment will be Nicole Kilburn. She's a professor of Anthropology and Archaeology, and specifically the Anthropology of Food from Camosun College, Grand Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. And we're going to kick off first with Jarrod. Jarrod, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you again.
Glad to have you with us, and sitting right beside me is Bill Busker, who's part of the Emerald Planet, and if we happen to lose you by Skype, he'll be coming right on. But tell us a little bit about the Next Millennium Farms and how you got into this, something that really is a leading edge industry when there is, in a sense, no real proven market as far as edible insects are concerned.
Well, to some degree, I think my mom would echo that we always enjoyed causing trouble. And this time, though, we've learned to manufacture that into something that benefits everybody instead of just ourselves. And it was an opportunity, you know, the world's food production is in trouble relative to their ability to produce food for the 7 billion people that there are, and the 2 billion people that are coming by 2050. And it was just such a lovely win-win opportunity for us as farmers, as well as for the food and the planet.
I want to put up this first image here. This is some of the, I guess, the breeding and developing gauges as far as some of the edible insects. Tell us what we're looking at here, and a little bit about the intensity of the farming operation and the outputs versus the inputs vis-a-vis what would happen if this was in a large cattle style operation.
So the benefits here again are that we're less susceptible to other environmental issues, and part of the advantage of this food source as it pertains to food and feed security is it's something that could be stored in bunkers or stored underground, so that if there was, God forbid, an environmental chaotic emergency or even something related to war, if you couldn't produce cows, you couldn't produce your protein or chickens or fish, etc. So this we could produce and store. Those were cricket bins that we were looking at in one of the farms. There they are. And in each of those bins is a substrate of feed, and in each of those bins are either worms or crickets at some point in their life cycle.
So looking at this, I believe this is a type of flour that you're producing. Tell us a little bit about this and about the quality of the food that's actually coming from the insects.
So what we do is we take the insects and we euthanize them in the least cruel way possible. Then we take those insects and we roast them in ovens, and then we grind them into a very, very fine flour. This is a very high resolution image of that flour. The grind is essentially exactly like common flour, which is the term we use for it, although it's not exactly a flour. It's more a protein substrate, if you will. And then that can be infused into salad dressings, soups, muffins, cakes, crusts, etc. There's an image of the roasted crickets before they're milled into the flour. A lot of people do buy the worms and the insects roasted, and they sprinkle them on a salad or something like that. So again, it would be much healthier than a crouton.
Yeah, looking at the gentleman here, the processing, is it expensive to process insects into these various byproducts, or relative to the processing of, say, large animal meat, is it much less expensive?
No, it's again far, far more efficient and far less expensive, and the environmental impact is almost negligible. We're using ovens to roast the insects and grinders to grind them into a flour. There's very, very, very little waste, and it can be done very efficiently with, higher scale ovens.
Now looking at this looks very mechanized, and of course we broadcast to all the countries abroad, many in developing nations. Is there ways that people can get involved in these developing nations where they can do a lot of this work by hand so they can absorb much of the excess local labor within these communities?
Yes, there's in fact another company called Aspire, which won the Clinton Global Initiative Health Prize last year, and they're also a group from Canada, from Montreal, and they're working on that project exactly, which is to try empower the other countries of the world to grow their own insects locally and manage to do it. We were just talking the other day about using some traditional ovens, some brick ovens, so that we could roast the insects and learn about that instead of these industrialized ovens.
So you're looking at maybe what would be commonly available across Africa, South America, even Southeast Asia, places like that, where they have to be very conservative fuel and access to power is intermittent. Now, yes. Looking at this, what are we looking at here? Are there different types of edible insects used in making this food that we're looking at? And if yes, how is some of this processed?
So this is one of my sister-in-law's dishes. There's some vegetables and rice and some dipping sauce. And there she used the flour and she infused it into a fritter-style little munchlet that you can munch on, that's crispy on the outside and chock full of vegetables and insect protein on the inside.
Jarrod, we're going to switch over, if you don't mind, to Nicole Kilburn over at Camosun College. So we're going to be leaving you and bringing up Nicole. Thank you for being with us, and we look forward to having you back in the near future so we can continue this conversation, because this is the first in a series, and it's something that we really need to be sharing with people around the globe about this, new food source as we move through the 21st century. So thank you for being with us, and we're going to bring up Nicole by Skype.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, Jarrod, thank you for being with us. Nicole, are you with us? Okay, we're waiting for Nicole. Bill, looking at all this food that we've seen going before us and the insects, while we're bringing up Nicole from up in Victoria, British Columbia, what is your impression of what you've seen and what you've been learning from Jarrod and the other professionals in this whole area of insects and food?
I think it's a question of consumer acceptance as to whether the average person will be willing to change his view or her view of insects that we may have as a preconception and view it as a protein source.
Yeah, that's very good. We have Nicole Kilburn. She is professor of anthropology and archaeology up in British Columbia. And Nicole, welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you with us, and we're going to have some of these slides going in the background. Tell us where your college is located and why you started these formal courses moving into anthropology and the anthropology of food, when really archaeology seems to be your major area of study when you were going through university yourself.
Sure. Well, certainly I started out in anthropology with a focus in archaeology. Anthropology covers the past, the present, culture, language, our biology. And it really wasn't until I started teaching anthropology in Victoria here, I teach at a first and second year college, that I realized that all of these different pieces really fit together. And food started being a really interesting lens to consider things like family dynamics and power and gender and identity, and the food as a way of pulling all those together and making it relevant for students started to take over my classes, quite honestly. And so a class dedicated to talking about the anthropology of food was really important. It was almost like an exorcism for me.
Well, looking at the insects and food, how common is it for humans around the globe to actually be eating insects and then also using it for animal feed?
Well, it's quite unusual for us here to not be insects. Probably 80% of the world's cultures and on a daily basis, 2 billion human beings are eating over 2,000 different identifiable species of insects. So it's incredibly common. Shouldn't be too surprising. Insects are, one of the most common organisms on the planet. It's quite unusual for us to not be including them in our diet. They're really important. They've been important in our human evolution. And probably the only reason that we don't have them as an important part of the Western diet is that here in North America anyway, and in Northern Europe, there just aren't very many insects, and they're not large enough for us to get a lot of good protein from them. Is going to change that, and should mean that we can really add them into our diet quite easily.
So looking at the 2 billion new people are projected to come on the planet by 2050, how do you see this evolution towards more acceptance of insects? We know 80% of the world is actually already consuming insects. So what about the other 20%, which is typically in North America, Europe, and some countries, the more affluent countries, we should say, in Asia?
Well, certainly meat and go hand in hand. And as an anthropologist, I realize that one of the biggest challenges is going to be changing people's cultural definition of what is edible. And that's going to be a really interesting challenge, but I'm seeing changes even in the last year in terms of people talking more about insect protein as more than just a bizarre food, and the shifts are incredibly important. We can't sustain 9 pounds on a Western diet. It is really unsustainable, and the amount of meat that is consumed in the Western diet that people want to adopt as a industrial life, particularly in China and India, it's not something that we can sustain. The nutrition and environmental elements that come with insect protein must be adopted by everyone, not just those countries that are developing, but in affluent European and North American contexts.
Nicole, we're going to be losing you, so thank you for being with us on the Emerald Planet TV.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us all the way from what's called Grand Victoria, British Columbia and Canada, and talking about insects, adding it to the diet, and how this is the new protein carbohydrate source, looking around the globe and seeing how we're going to feed 2 billion new people as we create the Emerald Planet.
Saving for retirement might be easy for some folk, but for others, it might take a little more work. And for those who haven't started, there are still things you can do to catch up.
Oh, that is good news.
Like getting out from underneath past debt. And don't get wrapped up with high-interest credit cards.
Get you some eyes.
Be diversified with your investments. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Your financial goals are not out of reach. The choice is clear. For a happy ending, choose to save.
Everyone with alcohol and drug addiction is in the same boat. With treatment, you can find solid ground. For drug and alcohol information and treatment referral for you or someone you know, call 1-800-662-HELP.
Dude, are you sure you want this tattoo? Because just do it.
Some mistakes in life are permanent. Like hearing loss. To learn how to protect your hearing, visit asha.org.
You've probably heard about heart disease, but did you know that it's the #1 killer of women nationwide? Heart disease claims more lives each year than breast cancer, lung cancer, or strokes combined. But there are steps you can take to protect yourself against it. For more information on how you can prevent heart disease, contact your local American Heart Association or visit their website at www.americanheart.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations looking for what we call the best of the best practices that can be used to take care, to feed and clothe and house and provide the energy that's needed for the planet. And as we go towards 2050, and we have 9 billion souls on the planet, how are we going to be able to provide the food source and at the same time to reduce the load on the land and the soil and the air as far as CO2 emissions and all the other inputs that are needed to produce the food for these new people. We have a gentleman that's coming to us, and he and his ancestors have been thinking about food and this balance with the environment for many millennia. We're going to have a very long name, Grandfather Lee Standing Bear Moore. He's a Kituwah storyteller, historian, and spiritual elder. And he comes from a sacred area called Manataka, American Indian Council, and out in Arkansas. And then right beside me is Bill Busker. In case we lose Standing Bear by Skype, Bill and I will be chatting away. And Standing Bear, welcome to the Emerald Planet TV.
Welcome. Thank you very much for the honor and privilege.
Well, it's a privilege to have you, sir, so we really appreciate you being with us. Tell us a little bit about this special Native American place called Manataka out at Hot Springs in Arkansas. This seems to be a very special area.
Wonderfully special, yes. Has been for thousands upon thousands of years, called Manataka by the Tula, who are the keepers of Manataka, and that word means the unbroken circle, or, as it has come to be known by many tribes, the place of peace. And of course that was pronounced in their own languages, in their own way. Manataka has been the place of pilgrimage, if you will, for thousands of years by many, many, many tribes. We don't know exactly how long they've been coming, but we know that from their own stories they tell us about the magnificence and the beauty and the healing power of Manataka.
Well, I know that you have a number of springs out there, and as I was doing some research, you have, I think it's called the Healing Breath, but you have the hot springs and then you have the cold springs. And it's the balance between those that really enhances health and long life and longevity. Tell us a little bit about this balance in nature, and then we're going to move into this whole notion of insects as a new but also a very ancient food source.
The balance between the waters, of course, has been disappeared long ago when the National Park Service came in and capped all of the hot springs except for one. And in capping the hot springs, we of course lose the balance. The balance, of course, came because each spring had its own qualities, its own taste, its own weight. For example, the springs that were used for the eyes, the alum springs, and then we had the iron springs and the magnesium springs. Each spring, of course, brought its own balancing power to the body. But when they capped all the springs, they decided to blend them in huge tanks below the ground. And that was a manipulation of what they called the natural resource. I call it a source. And when we did that, of course, all of the power and all the healing of the waters disappeared. But that doesn't mean that they're gone forever. It only means that they are temporarily stopped, as we are many times as humans in the things that we try to do.
Well, looking at this area where you're located, and then some of the images you have is just really fantastic. What you're doing there, Standing Bear. Tell us a little bit about the how, and the why, as far as Native Americans in Indian country, including insects in their diets, both traditionally and possibly even today.
Well, let's cover the why first, because that seems to be the easiest thing to answer. The why, of course, is, well, as my friend Althea Price once said, she said it is a lot easier to catch a grub than it is a mammoth.
That's a very illogical statement.
Absolutely. And of course, that same theme runs through all of it. It's called survival. And a lot of times when you are in a position, especially, let's say, the Paiute Indians of the high deserts and the low deserts of California, Nevada, and so on, they found it necessary to tap into that resource, and they found that the insects were quite nutritious. That is, they filled the body full of the right kinds of proteins and vitamins that they needed, and they also found that they were quite tasty. And being as the ladies learned how to prepare them in such succulent ways that everyone considered them to be a delicacy and sought after. And so the Indian found ways to not only find them and prepare them, catch them and prepare them, but also to store them over long periods of time, especially during winter months when food became more and more scarce. But Indian been eating insects for a millennium, for a long, long time.
Well, I think it's absolutely fantastic, and we have these images, if we can bring those back up, about some of the ways to prepare these. But our special guest, Bill Busker, is going to ask the next question. Bill?
Standing Bear, do Native Americans and other global indigenous tribes consume insects today? And is that part of your current diet?
Oh, absolutely. I receive boxes of already processed, already cleaned insects from an organization called World Into, or World Entomology is the word for eating insects. And they know how to prepare them in such a wonderful way that all sorts of recipes can be made from them. Now, regarding your question about indigenous people from all over the world, we know that people from China, well, I know personally Thailand and Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam, all of those areas of Southeast Asia and Asia regularly eat, as a part of their normal diet, insects. We know that people in South America and India and many other parts of the world, Africa, in fact, most of the population of the world eat insects today and have for a long time. It is only America and the European nations that have kind of stayed away from eating insects over the years.
Well, we're looking at, I think we had a short clip of a video there of preparing some of the insects, but I know that you sent me some of your recipes that you have, and if you could share some of the recipes that you were sharing with me about how to use insects both as a protein for maybe a main course, and then also you had something that sounded really scrumptious, a type of chocolate cookie, I think. And I'll leave that in your good hands. So why don't you share with us, Standing Bear?
Well, we call them chocolate chirp because it's called chirpy chocolate chip cookies. And they're made, of course, with some normal kinds of flour. I would not use white flour, but there are many other kinds of flours to use. Baking soda and salt and butter, all of that goes in along with some sugar. I use honey myself for a sweetener rather than sugar. A teaspoon of vanilla and eggs and an ounce of chocolate chips, along with a real good hefty cup, half cup or more of dried roasted crickets.
So that's giving you the protein. So actually you're boosting the protein content in those chocolate cookies. Tell us what would be, say, a main course dish that you're preparing from some of these insects that are being shipped into you.
Well, I would say that, you know, that mealworms make an excellent, excellent meal. Can be prepared in many ways, like a fish cake. And when you're using the mealworms, you can prepare them as a bread as well. And mixing all kinds of wonderful things with them, like berries and nuts. It's kind of like a fruit cake, and it tastes so beautiful.
I think it's fantastic. Well, you're selling people on having insects in their diet, and we're getting down to, we have a little less than a minute now. Standing Bear, tell us, where do you think that the Native Americans and, you know, the majority populations are going as far as consuming insects as part of a main part of their diet, say over the next 10, 15 years?
You know, it hasn't been that long ago that the American public and European audience didn't know anything much about sushi. But here today, all over, we have people eating sushi. And I think that that's an important indication of how open the American public is to eating things that they may not have 20 years ago. I feel that the public itself is open to many suggestions and ideas, especially if they know that it's for the world that we do this.
Standing Bear, we're going to lose you. Thank you for being with us. This was Grandfather Lee Standing Bear Moore from Kituwah, storyteller, historian, spiritual elder, sharing with us about insects as we create the Emerald Planet.
I need a job.
Necesito trabajo. I would like to speak English better. Me gustaría hablar inglés mejor.
I want to be a U.S. citizen.
Quisiera ser ciudadano de los Estados Unidos.
For over 35 years,
por más de 35 años,
the Hispanic Committee of Virginia has been serving our community.
El Comité Hispano de Virginia ha estado sirviendo a nuestra comunidad.
Job training and placement,
capacitación, ayuda para conseguir trabajo,
education for children and adults,
educación para niños y adultos,
immigration, naturalization, and medical referrals,
ayuda para los procesos de inmigración y naturalización y orientación sobre médicos
are a small part of what we do.
Son solo una pequeña parte de lo que hacemos.
For help, information, or to volunteer,
para ayuda, información o para ofrecerse como voluntario,
contact the Hispanic Committee of Virginia.
Comuníquese con el Comité Hispano de Virginia,
helping everyone participate more fully in American society.
Ayudando a todos a participar plenamente en la sociedad norteamericana.
Where's yours?
Would you notice if you were missing half your kidney function? According to the National Kidney Foundation, 20 million people have chronic kidney disease, and 20 million more may be at risk and not even know it. Anyone with high blood pressure, diabetes, or family history of chronic kidney disease is at risk. Early diagnosis is vitally important. To get the whole story, talk to your doctor and visit the National Kidney Foundation at kidney.org or call for a free brochure. Because when it comes to chronic kidney disease, you might not know the half.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, the President Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, coming to you from Washington, D.C., also the Director and host for the Emerald Planet TV, as we come to you on a weekly basis, bringing you as what we call the best of the best practices, the technologies, the services, and products that are going to make a difference as we move through the 21st century. And we're looking for the best practices as the planet goes to 9 billion people. And it's very important that we not have people that just join the planet and struggle, but to increase the quality of life. And so working with me is William S. Busker, Esquire, who is here as a special guest, help us with the interviews today. And also we're going to be bringing on Jarrod Goldin, who is the founder of Next Millennium Farms up in Ontario, Canada. And we're going to be talking with Jarrod as he's one of the leaders as far as generating and creating various sources of insect protein in various products and making this available in his own local communities and also around the world. So Jarrod, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you very much.
Glad to have you with us. And I know that we've talked in the past about the Next Millennium Farms and getting started, and you're really on the cusp of moving around the globe as far as insects are concerned. But tell us a little bit about the origins of Next Millennium Farms. I know you started that with your family, but then what really led you into insects as a feed source for both humans and eventually for animals?
Well, I guess it started when we read a document by the Food and Agriculture Organization last year that was titled Food and Feed Security. And it spoke to the impending problem of the increase in the population and rising toward 9 billion by 2050. And we saw a tremendous need and thought of how sad it would be that people would continue to starve and even starve at a more alarming rate. And we wanted to be part of a vision, part of a solution that wasn't a compromise. It was actually something much more than that. It was an enhancement in our opportunities to have protein, a healthier source of protein, not just nutritionally, but for our environment as well.
Now looking at this image here, this is where you raise both the crickets and the 3 different types of worms that you have. Now why did you select the crickets and the worms? What is the special properties that they bring to the food source? And then what I'd like to do is jump off and how this could have real implications for developing small businesses around the globe in Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America, even across the South Pacific. But first, why these particular types of edible insects, and what do they bring, versus the thousands, tens of thousands of other insects that are out there?
Basically, I think it was primarily a natural transition from the insects that we use in the breeding for our reptile feeding business. And these are insects that have done very, very well with reptiles. And they're also insects that have been commonly eaten all around the world for millennium. And we know them to be healthy, we know them to be safe. And in that respect, there was a natural transition from our experience as well as what worked for people.
Now looking at the types of insects that you have, and as you've brought out earlier, there's millions of different types of insects, and it depends on the continent and the latitude, longitude on the planet as what's really available to people. But how can people in these various countries, particularly those at the margin of having the nutrition that they need, can actually get involved in this and do it in a significant way where not only proverbially you're eating the edible insects, but actually is providing a good income source for people on a small scale basis?
Well, I hope we get to explore that further in the future by working with companies that are already aspiring to do that, and companies that are, as you said, entrepreneurial and are looking to do that in the future. And hopefully our experience will be able to translate into an opportunity for them and for the people that they hope to serve, and that we can translate our experience into having people use the technology that we have that's allowed for a scale up of efficiency in this type of farming. And
Go ahead.
No, we can export that, to those countries and help them feed themselves and empower themselves.
Well, you're talking about the continent of Africa. They're going very quickly towards 1 billion people on the continent among 54 nations. What kinds of ideas, suggestions would you have for people across Africa to look at or think about as far as even more incorporating edible insects into their diets instead of moving towards the concentration of large animals and producing food that way, and also the monocultures, say, of corn, soybeans, and other types of plants that take large inputs but may have smaller outputs as far as a continent that's rapidly expanding in population?
Yeah, I think, I would probably start off by talking to their traditional people, the traditional elders, and understanding what the origins of their foods were, and specifically insects in this case. And then, work with the right people who want to empower the young people to understand the benefits and how they could translate those benefits into businesses, as you've mentioned, as well as, and more importantly, the opportunity to feed themselves a very healthy source of nutrition. And I guess next to education, it's perhaps one of the most important parts of the future.
I think I would agree with you, Jarrod, very much. Tell us a little more about Next Millennium Farms and the recognition that you're getting in Canada, and how do you feel that the acceptance of what you're doing is expanding among the population there, and then through visuals and the broadcast of like the Emerald Planet TV may be helpful to people to understand what really we need to be doing as we do head towards 2050 and adding these 2 billion new souls on the planet.
Yeah, well, thank you again to Carrie and you guys at Emerald Planet for your support and your interest in the story. Without you and the media taking an interest, it would be far more difficult for us. But, I'm fortunate to say that we have already outgrown our 9,000 square foot facility. We're primarily producing flowers for other people that are converting that flour into protein bars or different kinds of confectionery, other kinds of, insect food as well. And we're also selling off our website to the public directly. And the response has been fantastic. People are very, very interested for all kinds of different reasons. Nutritional, their diet restrictions, they may be environmental. We launched a word, so to speak, on a platform recently called I Am Eco Warrior. And I'm not sure if Nicole mentioned this, but the word is geoentomarian. And what it means is somebody who chooses insect protein over other forms of protein for its nutrition and to reduce their carbon footprint.
I think that's really fantastic. And looking at the whole thing of disaster relief, this is something that's on the minds of elected officials and urban and even rural planners, because of the 300 major, what they call megacities on the planet today, 198 of these are sitting over deep fault lines as far as earthquakes. As you may be aware, earthquakes category 6 to 8 have increased by over 300% in a little over a decade and a half. So how can insects be brought into this whole response to disasters that are happening on a more frequent basis and much more severe as the planet goes towards 9 billion souls?
Well, again, I think in terms of its efficiency and its ability to be stored in mass volumes, it has a tremendous shelf life, especially if stored at colder temperatures, which you could do underground. And in that case, you could transport it quite easily to any kind of disaster zone. Obviously, traditional protein transport is part of the energy inefficiency of it because of the amount of freezing and other things necessary to transport it in a healthy way and then keep it in that healthy way. So we do recommend freezing it when you receive it, and it would last a lot longer, but it's not necessary. We've had it last well up to a year.
Oh, that's incredible. And looking at the various proteins and also the carbohydrates that we've seen in the images that we've put into this segment, Jarrod, What do you think as far as in the developing world, what kinds of things can they be doing? Because as you know, there's a scarcity many times of electricity, difficult to, in some areas, people have never even seen ice in their whole lifetime. So how can we process these insects so that actually it lasts a long time, but at the same time it can be distributed across the broad swath of the population base in places in Africa, Latin America, and Asia?
Well, I think that the issues related to farming are minimal. They would learn how to work with the temperatures that they have in those countries, not to compromise the farming. And storage would happen underground. They would, dig holes in the ground and store it, deep into the ground, and that would be cool enough to give it a longer lasting shelf life.
Looking at these two images, I'm going to go back and forth between these two slides. Jarrod, one here, I believe this is, you say it's not actually a flower, but it's more of a protein base, and then the insects, if we can bring this up. What is the nutritional value between the edible insects that we're looking at here vis-a-vis a traditional way of looking at a diet of animal proteins and sources of food?
So basically, because it's 65% protein by volume, and on average, people should have approximately 50 grams of protein a day. I'm including everybody in that equation. With 100 grams of this protein source, you would get 65 grams. So you need just slightly less than that. And you could, put it in your soup, put it in you could have it once a week, you could have it every day. You could sprinkle the dry insects on your salads. We work with companies that make these into chips, like tortilla chips. And it's very exciting as a parent.
Jarrod, I think we're going to be losing you, but really...
to school with something.
Well, thank you for being with us. This is Jarrod Goldin, who is the founder, Next Millennium Farms of Ontario, Canada. And he's sharing with us about how we can move through the 21st century, looking at insects as a key source of protein, carbohydrates, and as a way to sustain a planet with 9 billion and growing population. Thank you, Bill Busker, for being with us, and thank you, dear viewers, for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.